And I quote, "I wanted the story to be a child who basically looked like she was the last alive in a battle. Not necessarily bloody, just scarred, dirty, but beautiful and strong. The last one left to take over in a brutal world." End quote. Now that is an interesting story, and we can achieve all of it with frequency separation. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm David Bird with Reality Reimagined. I'm an award-winning photographer and Photoshop artist that specializes in fantasy composite art. Today we're going to finish our journey of editing a guest's artist image. My friend Chanel Bledsoe reached out to me seeking advice on using Photoshop to add to the images she captured of her daughter in a historical building that housed soldiers during the Civil War in the United States. The images tell the story of a young woman who has to face the ugliness of war, survive it, and rise above the aftermath as a powerful figure. This is the artwork we worked on in the first tutorial of the series, and using basic tools in Photoshop, we transformed the art into this final piece. If you didn't catch that tutorial, then take a look at the card above when you're done with this journey today to visit that adventure. This is the image that we are working on today, and the goal is to add some special effects to the young woman to suggest the directive of battle scarred and dirty, but beautiful and strong. To achieve this, we're going to use the very powerful retouching technique of frequency separation to enhance her eyes, the beauty and the source of strength, and also add dirt and scars to show what she has endured in this story. So now that we know what we're doing, let's dive into the Photoshops and begin this journey. Chanel is an amazing photographer, and if you'd like to see more of her beautiful artwork, please visit her main website at the link below. So to get started with this raw file in Adobe Camera Raw, the first thing that I want to do is to pull out the shadows. It's going to give us a little bit more detail into her daughter's face. That's the main focus point for the audience and the subject in the image, but also we're going to be building up some of those effects. Now, I've talked about in previous videos on the channel that there is a counterpoint to everything you do in Adobe Camera Raw, or really everything you do in Photoshop. So the counterpoint to pulling out the shadows is the highlights, and I want to pull those highlights down pretty significantly. Audiences are prone to going to the brightest source of light in the image. That's where they look first. It's a little too bright on this side of the image, so I want to pull that down so we don't fight the audience's focus. Now pulling out the shadows just a little bit more to get that detail. Then I'm going to go to the white point and increase it, and increase that white slider to the side, and then take the black slider to the left. That's the counterpoint. And also how you add contrast into these images, because the whites and blacks sliders in Adobe Camera Raw are dealing with just pure luminosity values of white, black, and gray. The contrast slider here does deal with luminosity values, but it also deals with color. So as we move this, it's going to enhance the color. I don't want that. I just want a good sense of three-dimension by enhancing the white and black and gray that we see in the light values. Now I'm going to increase the texture pretty significantly here. It's +10, I think is fine. Then we'll increase the overall vibrance and saturation. I've spoken many times in different videos on the channel that the three fundamentals of digital photo editing are color, luminosity, and detail. So with those three things being addressed in this basic tab, I think we're pretty good, and I don't really need to address any more except for one thing. I want a little bit more light on her face so that we can really see the details we're going to be painting in as special effects and make sure that the audience's focus goes there. But to do that, I want to do that as a practical pass of this raw file in Adobe Camera Raw. So to achieve the result of getting that practical pass, I need to open this file as a smart object. Down here where it says open, if I hold the shift key, it will now say open object. So I'm going to click it, and it will open the file into Photoshop, not as a PSD file, but as a smart object. And I need to duplicate this. So to do that, I need to come anywhere where there's not a word or the thumbnail and right click and come down to new smart object via copy. This is essential because if you duplicate the layer by hitting Control or Command and the letter J, those two layers are linked to one another. If you make changes to one, it affects both of them. But doing new smart object via copy, they are no longer linked. So I can double click this thumbnail. It'll take me right back into Adobe Camera Raw with all the changes we just made. And this is where I can increase the exposure. Let's see. I'm going to pull it down right about, let's go to down to like +50. So about, 0.5. Hit OK. And then I need to hide this with a black layer mask or a hide all layer mask. And to achieve that, I'm simply going to come down here to the layer mask icon and then hold Alt or Option and click it. It puts a black mask onto this layer, hiding the entire effect. Then all I have to do is paint white onto this mask to reveal it. My foreground color is set to white. I'm going to hit B for the basic brush. I'm going to make sure that I'm on a soft round brush, and I want to change my flow to be around 5 to 10% because I need control as I paint this in. I don't want to have my flow at 100%. So to change this from 5 to 10% using hotkeys, I'm going to hit Shift and the number 1. Then I'm going to use my Wacom Intuos Pro tablet and pen and start painting white onto this. Now, because I'm using a Wacom Intuos Pro tablet and pen, it has pressure sensitivity built into it. So even though we're at a flow of 10%, the lighter I touch the pen to the tablet, the lighter it's going to let the brush interact in Photoshop. So it's really painting around 5 to 6% as I work. And that's enough. I just wanted a little boost of light before and after to her face. Now, I've said in previous videos on the channel that subtlety is key inside of Photoshop. So even though I was very delicate with the painting and the exposure adjustments and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to come to the opacity of this layer and pull it down by 20%. I'm feathering it away just a little bit and bringing in some of that subtlety to all of this. I do want the audience to go to her face, and so that would be, you know, the result of keeping it brighter if I wish, but I don't want it to be so bright that the audience looks at it and goes, why is her face brighter than the rest of the image? So at this point, I think everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and flatten it by coming up to Layer and then down to Flatten Image. Now notice that I have assigned the F4 key on my keyboard to this function inside of Photoshop. All of my F keys on my keyboard have been associated to basic functions inside of Photoshop. It just saves you a little bit of time. So now I'm going to run my Retouch 4.0 action, which populates all the layers for frequency separation, for dodging and burning, and enhancing human eyes. If you are not familiar with what frequency separation is, or you would like this action for yourself, take a look at the card above. It will take you to the retouching series on this channel when you're done with this video. There are full tutorials on how to use frequency separation, dodging and burning, a whole bunch of other stuff, including a video that gives you this action and shows you how to use it. So I'm going to turn on the detail layer here and begin the process of painting in these special effects. And that's why I like to do this with frequency separation, because separating the detail from the color in human skin and then putting layers in between that, we can do so much to the image to enhance creativity and to achieve those goals of storytelling. Think about a fantasy character. If you want their eyes to glow, or you want them to have creepy veins inside of their skin, or scars and burn, whatever. I already have enough trouble sleeping as it is, so let's just leave it at that. Because the layer of detail and color are separated and we put a blank layer in between, whatever colors we put on that blank layer, they're above the color layer, but they're below that detail layer. That detail layer has the skin texture and everything else into it. It gives us a tremendous amount of freedom. So these are the two blank layers that I'm going to be painting on. I'll start with the first one that says Skin Retouch. Doesn't matter, they're both blank layers. And hit B for brush and come up to my brush window, and I'm going to use some of these brushes. Now these are brushes that I've either created myself or I've found over the years on the internet. It's not difficult to find things like watercolor brushes or fog brushes and so forth. Actually, this brush came from Flurm, which is a great resource for education, by the way, and Aaron Nace is a talented artist and a great educator. So finding these brushes, just use, with respect, some common sense to what websites you go to, and if the brushes cost some money, pay the money. There are a lot of traditional artists that do digital photo painting or digital painting using a program like Photoshop or Corel Painter, and they design their own brushes in those programs. Generally, those brush packs are anywhere from $5 to $15, and they're well worth the money because they're wonderfully created brushes that do quite a lot because they use them in their artwork. So buy some brushes, find some free brushes if you need to. Look at things like watercolor, smoke, fog, blood, whatever you need to go. So I'm going to use this brush, which is a brush that I made called a haze brush, haze number 1. There's many more of them I've been working on, but this is the one that I like to use a lot. Now, this brush I've designed to rotate its head every time I click the traditional mouse. So when I click the mouse button, it's going to rotate its position just a little bit to give some variance. When I use the Wacom pen, As long as I maintain contact of the pen to the tablet, it won't rotate. It will just paint in one straight line. That's going to come into play here in just a little bit. But first, we'll use the traditional mouse and get some of that rotation in. So I want to use this one to start building up a palette of all the dirt and the burns and scars and things like that. We need to start building up that palette that we can work with, doing some interesting things to really give it a sense of realism. What is the color that I want to use? Well, she's, been around burns and there's smoke in the air and so forth. So you would think you want to use black. No, because that's an extreme. We're using an extreme color in the scene. Where can we get some colors that kind of fit the overall scene that we're looking at? We can use the colors that are already in the image. So B for brush, just making sure that I'm on it. And if I hold Alt or Option, it will default to the eyedropper tool. So I can select some color. I'm going to use this dark skin tone that we see under her right eye and select it. That now makes my foreground color this color. When I click it, it's going to bring up the color picker. And I want to explain a couple of controls inside the color picker. This stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. Right now we see a brightness of 32%. I don't want to change the hue or saturation. I just simply want to change the brightness. And I'm going to take it down to like 15% and hit enter. Now my foreground color is very dark. Then I'm going to change the flow of my brush from 100% down to, let's say, 5% by hitting Shift, 0, and 5. While at the same time, that'll take it to that number of 5%. On this blank layer, below the detail layer, but above the color layer, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, decrease my brush size by hitting the left and right bracket keys. Left bracket key makes it smaller, right bracket key makes it bigger. And I'm just going to start clicking around. I'm painting on that blank layer, so I'm not damaging the colors beneath. And the skin texture is preserved, and I'm going to click on this side, give it a second for the brush engine to catch up, there we go, and then keep painting, and add just a little bit more color into the scene through here. Let's go ahead and hit her forehead in some general sense. Notice that I'm making the brush a little bit bigger and then a little bit smaller as I click, because we're on that low flow. It's letting us build up this overall effect. Paint a little bit on her nose, maybe down here on her chin, just a touch, around her lips, directly onto her lips. The kid's probably tired, has been through a lot, and we'll continue to paint just a little bit more. Yes, I'm technically painting over the crown, but it's not really that noticeable. So I think we're good to go right about that base layer. Now I'm going to take a step back and look back. Let's do a quick before and after. We're adding in those different tones. It looks good. If it's too much, that's the beauty of this process. All you have to do is hit E for the eraser and start erasing some of the stuff you've painted. You can add a new blank layer on top of this one, erase some here, but paint on another one. You could put a layer mask onto this layer and paint white or black on the mask to reveal or to hide it. There's a lot of options, and it's just as simple as painting. And let me take one more statement here, or a moment to make this statement. You don't have to have any training as a traditional painter. You don't have to have practice in this. I mean this with respect, it's just common sense. Think about building up colors. We want to start with a dark tone and then start adding some colors on top of it, and then use a couple of other simple ideas to add some more realism to it. So speaking to that, let's add another color tone into this. Where we're going to get our color? From her face. So I'm going to hold B for brush, or hold Alt or Option, excuse me, and select a new tone. Let's grab this one right through here. Now selecting that, it is going to start sampling some of the paint we've already used and try to sample the tones beneath it. It's an amalgamation of all the colors that it sees. So we have our new colors here, different hue, different saturation, and definitely a different brightness. Let's go ahead and change that brightness and go down to like 30%. That's an arbitrary number. I want something that's not as dark as what we had before, but a little bit darker than what it sampled, so we'll see some differences and variances. If it's the same color that I sampled here and I start painting it here without making any changes, it's going to be difficult to see it. Again, respectfully, common sense. The color has to change in some shape or form so we can actually physically see it. So continuing to paint on this blank layer, adding on top of things and blending in. This is blending it a little bit because the flow is low. If the flow was at 100%, it would just simply be covering up the paint we put down before. But if you really want to preserve the two different ones, you can come to the next blank layer and start painting there. Again, it will cover it up, but they're separated so you can continue to work with one or the other, like reducing the opacity of this layer if you want to see some of the darker colors underneath and so forth. Going to continue to paint and mix around just a little bit more. and add in a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, cool. We've got a pretty good base there. I want to add in, let's go ahead and just for giggles, add a new blank layer. To do that, I'm coming down to this icon, which will create a new blank layer. It added it here as layer 1. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and sample her lip color, but let's come in and get a darker tone. That's pretty dark, but let's go down to like 20% and hit enter. Our flow is still 5%, that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and take it up to 10% just to get this going for the purposes of the video, to speed this up just a touch. I'm gonna add in just some hints of those varying colors. This all is creating the realism. And think about it, subtlety is key inside of Photoshop. Does it make sense to just have one splash of color using this haze brush and that's it, and say, done, it looks like smoke and dirt on her face? No, that doesn't make sense. Add in variances of color that all are drawn from the color palette that you're working with. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and switch to another brush, and I'm gonna choose one of these watercolor brushes. How about this one, watercolor number 3. Let's make a new blank layer just for giggles. And we've got our tone. This time I'm going to use my Wacom pen, because what I want to do now is to start to make some areas where it looks like maybe she's shed a few tears during this battle, and maybe some of the eye makeup that she was wearing that has run just a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and maintain contact with my pen to my tablet. It's not going to rotate the brush head, and start painting up and down, and see how I'm getting that little line through there. I'm gonna come over here, I'm not lifting the pen, and I'm getting that odd shape as the watercolor brush is meant for, and we're just adding in some of these tones of darkness that we see maybe like right through here. And maybe we'll do just a little bit more right through here. And I'm moving the pen back and forth a little bit, but I never lifted the pen, so it's not gonna rotate the head. There we go. And let's go through here and notice how every time I lift it and move it, it's rotating the head and changing the size of the brush just a little bit too. That's key. I'm just making some random patterns through here to see what things look like. It looks pretty good. Control 0 to zoom all the way back out. If it's too much, you can pull some of it away, erase it, reduce the overall opacity if you want to. There we go. I think we got some good tones there. I'm going to sample some of that brighter lip color, and let's reduce the opacity to 25% now. And then I'll make a new blank layer. And let's go ahead and maybe give her like a scratch right here, that she got some sort of scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and go to 20% and just maintain that contact like that. And then change it a little bit, build it up a little bit more. Okay, that looks good. Then I'm going to change the brightness again and go down to 15%. And now start painting just a little bit. Let's lower the flow to 5%. I want this to mix just a touch and get some build up in there. And I'm just kind of trying to feather out the overall effect and build things in just a touch. Control 0 to see how that looks. It looks a little distracting to me. I think it's a little too much, so I'm just pulling the opacity down and just trying to build that in. I think that looks pretty good. Now I want to do one more for giggles. I'm going to hit B for brush. Let's come up to one of these painterly brushes. These I bought from an artist. I don't know who the artist, I don't remember the artist's name, but they did beautiful work. I'd been following it for a while, and they said, hey, I got some brushes. Would you like to buy them for 15 bucks? And I was like, shut up and take money. So now I've got their brushes. And it looks good, and I like this little pattern I see. So let's try, no, I'm gonna use my pen. I want some flow to this, and I want some control with that pressure sensitivity. So on this blank layer, let's go ahead, and I'm just making little gestures and trying to get some of this in. Maybe a couple of, ooh, not like that. Let's reduce this just a touch. There we go. Making some swipes like she's been scratched just a touch. Down through here, maybe down by her, no, that looks like facial hair. Okay, maybe here. Yeah, I like that. I like this brush. See how it's giving us those scratches and that flow, and it looks really good. And again, I promise you, it's very easy to start looking at traditional artists. Go to different websites like DeviantArt, or I'm blanking now on one of the names of a website that I like to. I'm just going to flash it across the screen as text, because my dad brain of 44 years old is just not working today. I didn't get much sleep last night. I like those scratches. Now I think that looks pretty good. And again, if it's too much, let's just minimize it just a little bit. There we go. That's pretty good. So something else that I wanted to show you, and again, this is a common sense kind of thing, but and again, I mean that with respect, don't feel bad. It took me a while to just realize this, but the day that I did realize this, I thought, oh my gosh, it's common sense. I should have done this. I've put down all of this color. We've been building up different color using different brushes. I like the way that it looks. But now I want to do something else. And for purposes of the video, I'm going to combine all of these layers into one to make this a little bit faster and easier. To combine all of them, all I have to do is select them all and then hit Control and E or Command and E. And now they've been combined together as one. What I want to do is put a layer mask onto this. Clicking the layer mask icon here, which puts a white mask onto it, which is a reveal all. So we see all the paint we just did. Using one of these artist brushes, I'm going to switch my foreground color from white to black by hitting the letter X. And then I'm going to increase the flow of the brush to 30%. And let's say she's been crying. I'm going to paint black onto this layer mask, which will hide some of the paint we put down, revealing the original color underneath. But we're doing it at a lower flow of 30% instead of doing it at 100%. And as I paint and stripe down, some of it's going away. Let's paint in a little bit more. Let's use one of the watercolor brushes. Let's go with this one. Let's go ahead and take some of this. I'm clicking and it's going to take some of that away a little bit through there. Over here, painting again black onto this mask, building it up just a touch. Oh, we're at 5%. That's why it's taking so long. Let's go back to 30. And right through here and get some of that cool effect back in. And because the brush head is so strong with this random pattern, it looks like some of the dirt didn't fully stick, or it's been washed off with tears or sweat or worry, or just didn't all get applied to her face in that general sort of way. So we're pulling some more of that away, and it gives us the chance to kind of sculpt some of this paint a little bit more that we put down, and not necessarily have to do things like lowering the opacity or whatever. I don't like that. Let's go back here and change the flow to 10% and click a couple of times, big strokes, there we go, and get all of that painted in. So using a layer mask, again, that common sense aspect to this is starting to pull away some of the paint that we put into this and some of that overall effect. We can continue going this route and try different brushes and scratches. You can find brushes that look like blood or paint spatters and add in whatever you want to see. But the next thing that I want to do is to come up to the eyes of this Retouch 4.0 action. I want to return back to a normal soft round brush, and I want to just go through the basic process of what I would do to enhance her eyes. Chanel's daughter's eyes are beautiful. Look at all the color that we see and all those tones in her iris, and we need those to stand out so that the audience sees that first. So I'm starting with the first layer here, which is for the eye whites. I've increased the flow of my brush to 100%, and I'm going to be painting white on this layer to reveal it. Now, this is one of the very few times that I use my brush at 100% because I want to get all the paint in around the eye. And I'm painting, going outside the lines just a little bit, but that's okay because I'm switching my foreground color back to black and just making one smooth stroke with the pen to undo that paint that I just did. So that's at 100%. This is something I call nuclear eyes, and I mean it jokingly, but as respectful as I can, because this is one of the common mistakes you see with artists who are beginning in Photoshop, where they have figured out how to whiten the eyes of a human subject, and then they do it at 100%. This is the origination of the phrase subtlety is key inside of Photoshop. No matter what else we do to this image, if you leave the whites of the eyes like this, the audience is going to see that and they're going to check out of the art immediately. So even though it's at that 100% flow of what I was painting, I'm going to come up to the opacity of this layer and take it down to about 30-ish% before and after. Before and after. It's a subtle little boost to the whites of the eyes. Now I'm coming to the second layer here, which is labeled 2 Iris Light Boost. Same process, painting at 100% flow and opacity right into the center of that iris and painting in some of that white, which is bringing some of the light into the iris and letting us see some of that detail. Now, stepping back out, is that too much? I don't think so. Sometimes, depending upon the lighting in the scene, this can make them look like they have vampire eyes, quote unquote. In this case, due to the lighting, I don't think so. Again, before and after that iris is being lifted, we see all that beautiful detail inside of it. I think it looks good. Before and after for the whites of the eyes, I think that looks good. Now, the last thing I want to do is come to the fourth layer, but number 3, called Color Boost. Zoom back in. This time I'm going to change the flow to 10%, painting white onto the black mask to reveal it, and just add a little bit more color into those irises so that both using color, luminosity, and detail, the three fundamentals of digital photo editing, we can pull the audience's focus to those beautiful eyes and let them connect to the strength, the fierceness that I see in these eyes. And that's why I want the audience to go there. She's holding a crown that suggests royalty. It suggests power and strength, right? I love that the audience needs to see her eyes first, see that determination. I see a little bit of anger, frustration, but fierce determination to survive in the aftermath of this war. And then as we stay to those eyes and then start to travel around the image, that's where we can take in the battle scars, the dirt, the blood, the crown, everything else, and further enhance the story and understand it. So I boost the color just a touch. Now I'm going to come up to the last layer, which is labeled for Iris Ring Darken. Now this is meant for that outer ring of the iris. Painting, our flow is at 10%, let's go to 5%. Painting white to reveal it right here on the outer edge. And it enhances that little black ring. I believe it's called the limb ball ring is the actual medical term for that, but I just call it the outer iris ring. Now that's what this layer is meant for, but I also use it in another way to add a little bit more depth into the iris, especially one where we see all this beautiful detail. So what I want to do is to look at any of the darker tones in her iris and just simply give it a little bit of a brush stroke. I'm just enhancing it just a touch more with some of that burning that we're doing in here and bringing in those little details. Now I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to come now to this layer here, which is an optional one called Extra Light Boost. And I'm going to paint white in the brighter areas and just enhance those a little bit more and get some more of that detail. Let's go maybe to 10% and get a little bit more boost. There we go. And then a little bit more boost over here. Control 0 or Command 0 to zoom all the way back out. I'm going to turn off the entire folder group so you can see the before and after for just the eyes. Before and after, before and after. Boy, does that pull us into her eyes. And it's subtle. It's using basic functions in Photoshop. These are adjustment layers or blending modes that are pulling things together to achieve this result. Using the power of frequency separation, separating the detail from the color, we can use whatever brushes to be able to paint in things, using some common sense of building up colors, taking some of the color away by using layer masks and enhancing things even further. The last little step would be to do dodging and burning. I use the curves adjustment method for dodging and burning. I always start with the burn. I'm going to paint with a flow of 10%, and I'm going to look for the natural shadows that I see in the scene. This is a global dodge and burn, not a local. Local is used to retouch skin. Global is meant to be used to enhance the sense of 3-dimension that we see in the image. This is a 2-dimensional image. We can enhance some of that 3-dimensionality by adding to the natural shadows we see into the scene and add to the highlights that we see into the scene with dodging. It's a wonderful technique that's been around for a very, very long time. Again, if you're new to Photoshop and digital photo editing, learn how to dodge and burn, learn frequency separation, because they are tools that you will use 85 to 90% of the time in all of your editing. Every single image I process for Reality Reimagined, whether it's fantasy composites, boudoir photography, freelance work that I do for my clients, I always start with frequency separation, dodging and burning, and enhancing the eyes. Let's go ahead and change the flow of the brush now to 5% for dodge. And just hit some of these little areas that we typically would dodge, which is like right underneath the eyes, top of the forehead, down the bridge of the nose, tip of the nose, lips, and the chin. We can hit some of the brighter areas of her hair. We don't want to pull focus with this, so we just need to augment some of the 3 dimensions that we see there. I'm going to add some more burn here onto her forearms and a little bit onto the dress that she was wearing, because again, we're creating some of that sense of 3-dimension. Now I'm going to turn off the black and white adjustment layer here by clicking the eye icon and zoom all the way back out, turning off the folder group for the before and after, before and after, before and after. Once we do a color grade, a little bit more artistic enhancement, add a texture, a vignette, we have achieved what I know to do, the best of my ability, to enhance that story, to show a young woman who is surviving in a world that she should never as a child have to encounter. So let's finish up this video and this adventure today with some final thoughts. So I couldn't help myself. I had to finish the art making of this. I went through a color grade using the Reimagined plugin, which is a art plugin for Photoshop that I created. You can find out more about that by looking at the description below and doing some final little enhancements and sharpening and so forth. This is artwork that it's just fun to create storytelling like this and to be able to let your imagination and creativity go as far as you want it to carry you in all the aspects of your career and things you work on. So understanding some of these basic tools in Photoshop, understanding these techniques, and taking them further than what they are intended to be. Most of the time, these things are created to solve one or two simple problems, or they're discovered because somebody needs to solve one or two simple problems. But the further you experiment with them, the more advantageous they will be to you as an artist as you continue going forward with your career. That's the end of this video. If you like the content, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel because new content debuts each week in photography and Photoshop education. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell icon to be notified of that new content when you return to the YouTubes. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, I'll see you out there in the world of Photoshop.